Okay, day 14, January 14th. It's cold all over the United States, and it's currently like in the 50s here in Florida, so smidgen chilly. But my poor friends in Wyoming, it's down to negative 37. My friends in Colorado, in the negatives as well. So yeah, this is when I'm glad that I'm no longer living in Colorado or Wyoming, but I'm in Florida where it's slightly chilly. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this day. And God, I just pray that right now as temperatures are dropping and it's getting colder, that we remember our warmth is from you, our strength is from you, our comfort is from you. I pray that the electricity stays on for those around the country who are in the negatives and single digits. Please keep them warm, keep them safe, and let them know who you are. I pray, God, that today you open our eyes and you reveal things to us about your character that we might not have seen before. May you keep us humble, and may you use us for your will and your victory. In your Son, Jesus Christ's name, amen. Okay, so I think cold weather makes me have a happier attitude. I don't know. Okay, so January 14th, we are looking at Genesis chapter 37, verse 1 through 7. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. Remember, Jacob is Israel. This is the account of Jacob's family tree. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the son of Bilhah, the sons of Zephlah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Sorry, my brain started to think about how Gail had told me that I could go on and listen to the Bible and then I would hear how to pronounce it properly, but then I would still slaughter it. It takes too long for this brain to recognize and repeat words that I haven't heard before or have different soundings. Okay, continuing on to verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he had an ornate robe for him, and that means the Hebrew for this word is uncertain. So it's saying that it's uncertain what the ornate means, but we have heard it, the colorful robe. So Jacob, Israel, loved Joseph more than any of the other sons, and so he's much older now, Israel is, and so he created a beautiful robe for Joseph. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of the other, they hated him and could not speak a kind word of him or to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were building sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you automatically rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brother, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to them, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent them off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived in Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers." Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. So I just want to take a quick few minutes to look at this section. A lot of people think that Joseph was, bragging about his dream and trying to show off and the fact that he was the favorite. But I also feel that Joseph might have been, truly excited. Like, he's hearing from God. He wants to share what God is telling him. He might have been confused and saying, "Hey, look, this is what's going on." And of course, his brothers are very jealous. But you also need to remember that Joseph is now 17 and his brothers are in their 30s, like late 20s, 30s. And they have a heart that is not really for God at all. It's very angry. We saw what they did. One of the brothers have slept with his stepmother. The other brothers have murdered an entire village. So they don't have a heart for God. They're not the best kind people around. And I feel like Abraham loves God and is trying to bring God to his family, but not truly succeeding. But Joseph, he's older and he sees the wrongs that he's done with his older sons. And so now he really wants to pour God into Joseph. This is how I interpret this and what I see it is happening. And so he's just trying very hard to love Joseph. And now also remember, they haven't set up a religion of God yet. They're surrounded by people who are pagans and believe in multiple gods, do sacrifices, do whatever feels good to themselves and flesh, and they're self-serving. And all these other religions are self-serving. And so you have Abraham, who's out alone trying to teach his family who God is, or Jacob, who's trying to teach his family who the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob is. So he's trying hard to establish this new religion. Everything's kind of new. And of course, there's always animosity between brothers and siblings when it is blatantly there's favoritism. And we see what favoritism does throughout the whole Bible, especially since in the first 37 chapters, we saw Cain and Abel, we saw Rebecca and, we saw Sarah and Abraham and Hagar, and we saw Leah, Rebecca, and Jacob. And so we just see the dynamics of what favoritism does and how it destroys, but also how greed destroys, because jealousy comes as a result of greed. Okay, moving on to Genesis 37, 18 through 36. But the brothers saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue Joseph from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern and here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him off his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern, and the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So it's just like this big, huge, empty thing in the ground. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, Remember, Judah is Leah's child. What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother and our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took them to Egypt. And that's about 230 grams of silver. And I want to stop for just a second and let it be noted that later on we will see that this is what the price of slaves, the price of selling a person, was 20 shekels. Moving on to verse 29. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Potiphar's officials, the captain of the guard, or one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So Potiphar is very close to Pharaoh. And the people, the brothers who were involved in the selling, were all of Joseph's brothers minus Reuben, because remember, Reuben came back. He's like, "What did you do?" And Benjamin never went out. So Benjamin stayed at home with his father. So we have 9 of the 12 who conspired to take Joseph down. Now we get into this crazy chapter, Genesis 38, verses 1 through 30, and you're like, why would you put Judah and Tamar in the middle of this story of Joseph? So Joseph has been sold. Who was the one who actually sold him and came up with the idea? Judah, who is Leah's son. Judah is the one who's going to carry Jesus's lineage. So listen closely, because this is key. This is Jesus's genealogy, his ancestors, and let's just make it very clear that God has used from the very beginning the people who are the worst, the most sinful people, or the most broken people. God has used to keep Jesus' genealogy. So if God created his son out of this line, he chose to come back to earth and be born from a line of not the best people, the broken, the hurting. That's a symbol for us to know that those are the people that he came to save, the people that he wants to love and be in heaven with them. So are you ready for this craziness? Genesis chapter 38, verses 1 through 30. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man, Adullam, named Haran. Then Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite woman named Shur. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son named Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shalom. It was at Kezebah that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Her name was Tamra. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death. Tamara